is, do I flush weekly or do I flush once a year? Or don't flush at all? Today we're going to be answering one of the most asked questions, or I should say the biggest dilemma with steam system. Is it a gauge glass? Is it a sight glass? And do you flush weekly or do you flush once a year on a steam boiler? So right here we have a steam boiler, right? This is one of the most old systems here in New York. Specifically this one because this is a oil steam system. So the oil steam system, compared to natural gas, it burns a lot hotter. The number one problem with oil is delivery, right? Getting oil straight to your tank. If there's snow outside, or if you live somewhere where there's big hills and it's snowing, it's going to be impossible for you to get oil delivery straight to your house. The big controversy is, do I flush weekly or do I flush once a year? Or don't flush at all? Nobody's putting in steam in their house. So nobody that has a steam system has a perfectly sealed steam system. Therefore, you must flush once a week. The old mechanical low water cutoffs, you would have to do them weekly. Therefore, you're letting water in at the same time, because if you have to take water out, you also have to put water in. So that defeats the whole, you don't have to flush a steam system once a week. You only have to flush it once a year. This is not true. Again, because if you have to take water out, you got to put water back in. This here is your newer style low water cutoffs. This is where the probe sits right here. So if we go ahead and we disconnect the low water cutoff, there's a yellow light. It's probably tough to see in camera, but there's a yellow light that comes on. And when that yellow light comes on, we will see that the boiler is going to then feed water. Right now, we're mimicking that the boiler has low water, that the feeder will feed in a couple minutes. Here we have your gauge glass, where the water sits inside of your boiler. This is not a sight glass. A sight glass is something that you can see in your refrigeration system, not on a boiler. Gauge glass, not a sight glass. Another thing is, yes, a lot of plumbers will love to tell you that you don't have to flush your steam system. If you don't flush your steam boiler once a week, then your boiler is going to break down a lot faster. This pigtail right here, as you can see, it flattens out as it turns. It's a perfect spot for dirt and debris to get caught inside of there. So if you don't flush your boiler once a week, you'll have a clogged system. That's your feeder right now. Took about maybe 1 minute. It's a 1 minute delay. So we're going to put this back on here. And that's beautiful, fresh New York water coming into our boiler, which is then going to be turned into steam. If you don't flush your boiler once a week, again, you're going to have several issues with your boiler. There we go. We just added fresh water into the boiler. Did that kill the boiler? Absolutely not. Every single radiator has a steam vent, right? An air. Therefore, whenever the steam is turning back into water, it's sucking in air. You always have a mixture of fresh air inside of your steam system. I don't understand how anybody can possibly think fresh water adding to the steam system is hurting the system. Everybody keeps quoting this great guy, Dan Holloman or something like that, inside that he wrote the blueprint to the steam system called The Art of Steam, right? Something like that. However, Karl Marx was a great socialist, right? He wrote a whole bunch of books on communism and socialism. And socialism and communism works great when it's on paper. But on a huge society, that's just not going to rock. It's not going to work. It's the same thing, right? Just because somebody smart wrote it down in a book doesn't mean that it's going to work on in reality, right? Your boiler needs to be flushed weekly. Just because some guy that probably didn't even get his hands dirty wrote down that you should flush it, you should rarely or never flush it, doesn't mean that it's true, right? You could either take it from me, somebody that's been doing it for 15 years, that learned from guys that have been doing it for 40 years, or you could take it from some dude that sat in his house and decided to write about how steam systems should really work. So again, most customers have already a setup for their draining. Here we have a hose. Here we have a hose connected to a drain valve. Very simple. It goes straight into a drain where it doesn't matter. We have a heating coil for your domestic hot water system, but then we also have a hot water tank installed. This is probably the best setup that you can have in your house. If you do have a steam boiler that does your hot water, but you don't have a tank, if you have gas to your house, you can get a gas water heater installed. This way, you can use the water heater in the summertime. In the wintertime, you can switch it up. You can shut off water going to the tank, and then you can have it come out of your steam system. This way, it works perfectly. You'll save some money that way because you're not using the boiler and using up all the oil in the summertime. And as you guys know that own oil is expensive, and your oil burner burns as much oil as it does trying to heat up water as it does trying to give you heat. This here is your pressure trough, no more than 2 pounds. They say you can heat up the whole Empire State Building with only 2 pounds of steam. This here, again, this is your pigtail. So the pigtail, if you don't flush weekly, you're gonna have your pigtail clogged, your drain valve clogged, your low water cutoff probe clogged as well. All of this happens because the boiler is obviously making steam, therefore leaving all the sediment. And I don't know if you guys notice, these pipes here and the pipes up here, these pipes are original to the house. Somebody that gets a steam boiler is never going to redo the piping whenever they get the boiler replaced. Therefore, when you get a new steam boiler, after a week, the water will be very dark and very dirty because it's coming down from all those old pipes and picking up all that rust and sediment that's in the pipes. That's why it's very important, I keep beating on this, that you flush your boiler once a week. No more than 2 pounds. If you're doing maintenance, you always want to make sure that this here is unclogged, because this is what sets off the fire to the steam system. A hot water system has an aquastat. It detects the temperature inside, so it tells the fire once it's shut off at a certain temperature. When you're making steam, you don't want the boiler to ever shut off on temperature. You want it to shut off on pressure. Therefore, that's what the pressure control does. Whenever this reaches 2 pounds, it will shut off. It's always good to have a backup. You don't have to have a manually reset, but it's always good to have a manually reset pressure control. This way the boiler doesn't come back on in case it fails. You could call a professional or you can reset it yourself, but then that will let you know that your pressure control, your main operating pressure control, has failed. I don't know if a lot of you guys have a red switch on your boiler. Whoever installs your boiler, make sure they have a red switch so everybody knows in case you have company over your house. They don't immediately shut it off thinking it's a light switch. And from that, we'll see you on the next time.